Welcome to CPAC Now, America Uncanceled. It's been quite couple of weeks in light of the horrific assassination of our friend Charlie Kirk, someone who we all greatly admired. And I remember Charlie being so young and coming to CPAC when Turning Point was just a couple of folks. It was just such an incredible time to see him grow, and in so many ways, and especially in his faith. And I wanted, here at CPAC, wanted to honor his legacy, honor his life. And I'm so honored to have with me Pastor Lucas Miles. He is Senior Director of TPUSA Faith and author of the new book, which you all need to get, Pagan Threat, Confronting America's Godless Uprising, which your friend Charlie Kirk wrote the foreword. Pastor, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me on. It's good to be here. Look, there were a lot of allies alongside of Charlie for a long time in just the fight for conservative values and just seeing faith and liberty increase in this nation. And so appreciate all your work that you guys have been doing over at CPAC, and it's an honor to be here just to talk about his legacy.
Well, we watched so carefully, and so many of our friends were at the memorial. I first want to ask you, how is Erica? That is who I have to say, being a spouse of someone who's involved in politics, being in politics myself, I just, every word she has said, everything she is representing right now, the source of strength, the source of perseverance. I mean, my heart goes out to her and to her family.
Yeah, I mean, first off, just on behalf of everybody at Turning Point USA and the Kirk family, I mean, we're just all so grateful for the prayers and support that are rolling in. I mean, I think it's real obvious from, what we have seen of Erica, both with her speech to the nation, that first Friday, and then as well as the memorial, that God's grace is on her life. And he's sustaining her, and she is really leaning into him as her source. And I think that's very evident to everybody. I'll let the family speak to the personal sides of that, when they're ready. But I think that she's made it really clear what she wants people to hear, and what they heard from her the other night was a powerful declaration of the gospel, God's unconditional love, and just a woman with complete resolve to see a mission completed. And I think that there's obviously some recalibration anytime you have a tragedy at this scale that has to take place. But I believe her when she says that the whole world's going to know her husband's name and know the message and the mission that he had. And we're expecting great things on the other side of this with her leadership and being named CEO.
So, we were in CPAC Paraguay. Matt just came back from CPAC Australia. And just we're working closely with our counterparts in Spain, and so many international leaders really speaking about how they've been inspired by Charlie and the impact that he's had on so many of us. I have these great memories of Charlie walking into my West Wing office during the first term, and just with this big smile on his face, and just being like, okay, what do we got to work on next? Like, let's hone in on this, or let's hone in on this Hispanic group or faith group, and it was always just this energy that he would share with the rest of us. But talk us through in terms of, as we're trying to deal with this, right? As the conservative movement, as the freedom movement is trying to process this horrific assassination, and what do you tell his followers, the people who cared for him, that are trying to figure out, like, how could this have happened?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we know how it happened, and I think Charlie knew the conditions that created an environment like that. I mean, the indoctrination of our children, the Marxist injection into society, these are all things that Charlie's been warning about for a really long time. The total departure from a biblical or godly worldview. And then you wonder why kids grow up with no value for human life, and that they're, see life through the lens of a video game, that they can just get on a perch and take out somebody that they don't like. It's vile, it's disgusting, it's human depravity on display. But it's not shocking when you understand what's been happening for so long.
Right.
Look, I wish my whole life that we could turn back the clock. I mean, I just keep thinking, like, how do we undo this? You know, it's like
Yeah.
you're dealing with grief in various stages. Like, it's, you know, how can we undo this? I got to call Charlie and like ask him, how do we fix this? You know, like I've had that thought a couple times, but like I think the answer is the same answer Charlie's always given us about how we fix this, and this is we have to make faith a priority, and you know we have to give our life to the lordship of Jesus Christ. Until that happens, you're going to keep seeing this. I mean, this is no different from Cain killing Abel. You know, it is just depravity upon depravity, and there's only one solution, and it's the cross. Charlie knew that. He understood it. Politics and conservatism, it comes out of that. But you know, we have to solve, I think, the root issue, and that is we have to reintroduce young people to the gospel. And thankfully, at Charlie's memorial, that happened on a massive scale where the whole world heard. And I'm optimistic about where do we go from here, but there's still, in typical Charlie Kirk fashion, there's still a lot of work to do.
A lot of work to do. In fact, you saw the left kind of go crazy, and then they started using words as Christian nationalism. This is the rise of Christian nationalism at its best, and really being very critical of Christianity. I want to play a clip from Don Lemon,
Please,
saying just that.
And here is where we have to tell the truth here. What we saw in that arena was not simply faith-finding public expression. It was religious nationalism on full display. That is the truth. That is my truth. This is my freedom of expression. This is my First Amendment right to be able to tell you the truth from my point of view. Not just from my point of view. This is what it is.
So there you go. I mean, Pastor, this is where the left gets petrified by, and I say the left, but I mean, I think it's those people who do not believe in God, who have done everything they can to silence Christians time and time again, to basically make us so that we don't talk about Jesus Christ in the public square, or even in our offices, let's say.
So what you're seeing here, and I write about this in the book Pagan Threat, is basically a self-deification. It's all an attempt to make us God or mankind God, rather than bow our knee to the true King of Kings, Lord of Lords. And so what happens is we want to be the ones to decide who gets to live, who gets to die. We want to be the ones who get to decide our gender or our sex. We want to be the ones who get to decide, you know, when does life start in the womb. You know, it's all an attempt to try to put ourselves on the throne so that we can decide that. You know, Charlie has been called by many, you know, provocative. And my response to that is Charlie was only provocative if you didn't want to hear the truth. Somebody who welcomes the truth thinks of him as wise, thinks of him as insightful, thinks of him as a breath of fresh air, you know, as speaking, you know, ancient wisdom from the scriptures. You know, if I've given this analogy a few times, if you're wandering in a desert and you're about to, you know, die of dehydration, and somebody comes out of nowhere and offers you a nice cold ice water and directions to the nearest town, or even offers to pick you up and take you there, the only way that is provocative is if you don't want to be found, if you don't want to be saved. And unfortunately, we have a world right now that would rather declare themselves God than actually be shown the way to salvation. And I think Charlie understood that, but I think the problem is even worse than what we thought it was.
So what inspired you to, first of all, tell me about how your journey, your faith journey, how you end up becoming a pastor. I mean, you look too cool to be a pastor.
Well,
my favorite, now I'm Catholic, so I've got, you know, kind of like the cool priest, the nerdy priest, and then I've got my Presbyterian minister who is one of my dearest friends, who, you know, has been a Presbyterian minister for, I don't know, 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
But, so like tell us your life journey in terms of how you get to this point that you're like, I need to spread the gospel.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you the short version of it. I grew up in a great Christian home. My parents loved the Lord. I accepted Christ when I was 12. I really felt set apart in some ways. We lived about 1.5 miles from the church. I would come over to the church.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in outside of South Bend, Indiana.
Oh, really?
And so, it was a great upbringing in the Midwest. It was back when you could, you know, ride your bike everywhere and play outside until the street lights came on, and, you know, all those sorts of, all the upbringing that you want, you know, for your kids. And we lived so close to the church. I would come over to the church quite a bit. I used to come over here so often I would break into the gym at the church to play basketball, or to, just hang out with, my friends and stuff like that. And we weren't causing trouble. We just wanted a place to be. I did that so many times. The church eventually gave me a key because that way I would
Smart.
stop kind of
Okay.
breaking the screens and
Yeah.
everything. And I kind of had what I call this Samuel experience. Samuel in the Old Testament, he just grew up in the church and he grew up, serving there and eventually kind of found his calling there. And that's really what happened to me. I mean, there wasn't abuse, there wasn't trauma. I had a great experience in church, some great mentors in church growing up. And I started preaching about the age of 17. We didn't have a youth pastor at the time.
Right.
We kind of had, there were gaps in the times that the church had a youth pastor. And I just started kind of ministering to my peers. And so for a while, I was leading the youth group as a high school kid. And now I'm, 45 years old, and I've been the senior pastor of the same church for, it's my 21st year. I've been at the same church my wife and I started. We've started from kind of people with no name or reputation in Indiana, and God's elevated us to, just amazing places across the land to be able to sit with world leaders. This last week at Charlie's memorial, I mean, it was in the midst of the grief. You're at the same time going, Lord, what is this? Like, how did I get here?
Right.
And as Charlie said so often, I've just tried to make my life be about, here I am, Lord, send me, use me,
Amen.
Lord. I'm willing to step out. Sometimes it's just about saying yes.
Mhm.
We, of course, have a lot of steps in that journey that has gotten us here. I've been with TPUSA Faith for about a year and a half. Charlie, it's, kind of a fun story. I didn't apply for this job. I wasn't looking for work. I did not have working for Charlie Kirk on my bingo card. I had spoken at a couple pastor summits for Turning Point. I had written a few books. My last book, Woke Jesus, did pretty well. And it got on Charlie's radar. He had me on his show a few times. And the last time I was on his show, it would have been a year ago in May. He just confided in me and said, hey, we're thinking about, making some changes with our faith department. We really want to have a pastoral figure at the helm, like operationally leading what's happening here.
Right.
Rob McCoy, who you saw at the memorial, he's been a Charlie's pastor for, over a decade. He's been, in the mix. He serves as like a pastor emeritus to the organization. Yeah. But Charlie saw the need for having somebody kind of in the day-to-day of the operations, leading the staff. And so he mentioned it to me. He's like, we're going to start trying to collect some candidates. If you have any names, let me know. And I said, you get 4 or 5 names. I'll fly out on my own dime. I'll vet them for you. I'll make sure you get the right person. And he's like, I might take you up on that. And a month later, he shoots me a text. We jump on a call. He starts talking to me about like, hey, I think I really need your voice spiritually in the movement. We want your help for this, everything else. And it just wasn't clear he was offering me a job.
Right.
And I was like, Charlie, yeah. I said, if you need me to come out there, I'll do it. I said, I can come out once a month, whatever it looks like, just to support you guys for a little bit till you get on your feet, with the faith department where you want it. And he's like, no, Lucas, you're not understanding. He goes, I'm offering you the job. He's like, you're the guy. He's like, you're supposed to be doing this.
Wow.
He's like, the Lord told me. And that was not what I expected to hear. It was kind of one of those moments like, okay, that was not my plan, but we prayed about it. I knew as soon as the words came out of his mouth that it was God. Right. And I just didn't know how I was going to say yes yet and how I was going to make it work. So I continue to pastor a church in South Bend, Indiana, and I commute to Phoenix. And Charlie and I both felt that with me being a pastor, I was more effective if I'm calling on the nation's pastors as one of them rather than just an operational person. And not to say there's anything wrong with that, but right now that's what seemed to make the most sense. And so I'm honored to do it. I was honored to serve under him. I learned so much from him, even though he was 15 years younger than me. Just such wisdom, just a once in a lifetime, mind to be able to, really learn from and serve. But we're going to keep the mission going. I don't plan to go anywhere, and we got a lot of work to do.
So my daughter graduated from University of Notre Dame. My second daughter is at University of Notre Dame, so we're fighting Irish
come
all
on
the
out.
way. Yes, now that I know you're in South Bend, Indiana, we're going to come visit.
We'd love to have you.
So let's talk about your book, Pagan Threat. Charlie wrote the foreword, and one of the lines he said here was the fact that we're basically fighting to restore the moral order that existed prior to Christianity. In other words, the moral order of the pagans. Are we returning? Is the nation, is the world, are we returning into this pagan moral order?
So I would say from the moral standpoint, yes, without a doubt, but it's looking differently. So, sometimes people see the title of the book And I will mention this in case I forget it later. There are a lot of fraudulent copies of Pagan Threat that have popped up on Amazon. So there's
Really?
about 15 different versions that
Okay.
they steal our font, they steal our colors, they don't have the forward from Charlie Kirk, it's not from the publisher. So and several of those have become a bestseller through this process because the book is doing so well.
Right.
So so make sure you order the right one when you go online. When you look at this, paganism has changed. I would say that what we have today is a neo-paganism. It's not just that people are worshiping Thor and Odin, or that everybody believes in Mount Olympus, or that all the Greek gods have came back, or something like that.
Right.
What has happened, though, is that, and what's driving this, it's not a revival of paganism by itself. It's actually paganism that's being pushed onto people and injected into society through network television, through the Cartoon Network, through Disney films, through all this sort of stuff, as well as school systems and these things and what they're learning, and it's for the purpose of supplanting Christianity. So Marxism is a parasite. It has to have a host to survive. Christianity is a bad long-term host for Marxism. Short term, you can have Christian, the Christian left, and it appears to work. But what's happening is, if you add Marxism to Christianity, eventually people will deconstruct from the Christian side of that, and they'll just become Marxists who are atheists or agnostic in some form. And so Marxism needs a better vehicle, and it found that vehicle in paganism, and specifically in witchcraft and the occult, in I think some of the trans cult, movement that's happening. I think also in radical environmentalism and globalism that we're seeing, things like theosophy. And so I go through the book, whenever I put a book like this together, I really want it to be the definitive guide. And so, and I will also say that my books are very progressive in the sense that they build upon themselves. So the first chapter is laying the foundation for really what is the main thing that I want you to get towards the end. It's kind of just the style that I have written several of these with. And so it's important to see the formation of this belief system, and that this is all intentional to push Christianity aside, because a Marxist morality does not function in a Christian society, but it does in a pagan one.
Let's talk about the propaganda, the social media behind this. You mentioned the trans culture, goodness, like I remember, I think it was on TikTok, where they would do these mutilations, right? Literally, like these girls were turning into boys, boys into girls. Yeah. They would videotape all these segments, and then this propaganda being pushed out to almost make them into this victim-like figure, having an impact on millions of kids, really, across the United States and even across the globe. I mean, tell us about the harm of that, where propaganda has been such a huge component of increasing this godless society and really tearing down Christianity.
First of all, and I don't have all the receipts for this. I'll leave this up to some better investigative journalists than myself, but I know that there's some people out there that are working on some of this. It's important that the average person recognize that media is in many times fabricated. Okay, and what I mean by that is a lot of what we see, from social media to actual news media, is pay to play. It's either favors, or it's
funded,
funded to push some idea. And so you see, well, this is just an influencer on TikTok, and they're making a video. Well, are they getting paid to make that video? Are they getting? I'm convinced there's kids that are getting paid to pretend like they're Muslim right now, so that this will be a thing that's pushed. We're seeing that shift happening. There's also bots. There's kind of these just fake accounts that are leaving comments, so it looks like there's tons of support for a particular issue, or tons of views for a particular issue, and there's really not. So there's a lot of fabrication. You have to wade through all of that when you look at this. But when it comes to this, I think that some of the propaganda we have seen is there's a huge push. TikTok Live is where a lot of this, I think, is at. I'm a big TikTok fan. It's actually my largest platform. But I think that Christians need to be out there and engaged with it. It's a marketplace right now, but it's also, there's a lot of dark spaces, and so you have to be careful with it. So you go to TikTok Live. I could open it right now and show you people doing tarot readings live, on TikTok.
Yeah.
It's what I call digital paganism, or techno-paganism, is where, it's a combination of technology with this. We're also seeing this with pop culture a lot. There's been a huge conversation about male, young Gen Z men that have been trending more conservative. Charlie Kirk was certainly at the center of that trend.
Yes.
We also have names like Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro. you know, Glenn Beck, of course, President Trump, JD, others. But when you start thinking about young women, it's different. You know, if you try to name household conservative women that everybody knows their name, because when you say Joe Rogan, virtually the whole nation knows who he is,
Yeah.
or at least something about him. You say Charlie Kirk, I mean, especially now, everybody knows who Charlie Kirk is. You say, you know, you just name a random conservative, even if it's a congresswoman, not everybody knows who they are. There's a lot of
Right.
people that aren't involved in politics. But if you say Taylor Swift, you say Nicki Minaj, you say Beyonce, these are names
They
that
know.
everybody knows.
Right.
And a lot of them talk about their their relationship with pagan practices. They're carrying potions, they're carrying tarot cards in their purse. They have different identities they take on when they go on stage. They say that they have a spirit. You know, Nicki Minaj says she has an 8-year-old boy that lives on the inside of her named Roman, that he died and his spirit embodied her, and he's the one that performs through her when she goes on stage. So young women are disproportionately being, you know, fed this on a much more significant scale than young men are. Not to
Right.
say that men are completely, you know, void of you know, indoctrination with this, but it's different.
You bring up a great point because my oldest, we have the 5 daughters, and the oldest is 22, and she was sharing with me some poll numbers about how the Gen Z women, the ones that even voted for, so like the Harris voters, but also the Trump voters, the women, when you ask about having children, it was down almost at the
Yeah.
bottom.
Yeah.
Like it was all about financial independence, financial security, kind of up at the top. And then this idea of kind of marriage and children. Even Trump women, Trump Gen Z women were saying, starting a family, having kids down low on the priority. And when you saw the Trump Gen Z males, their idea of getting married and starting a family was much higher. So that to me is an interesting
Yeah, and there's a
discrepancy,
dichotomy there
right?
between. Yeah, and what that means is it might be really hard to find a date if you're single right now.
Yeah,
So
no
it's
kidding.
it's a bad time if you're looking for. But look, I think that's where Turning Point comes in. Just come to a Turning Point event, and you're going to find somebody who might think more like you, America Fest or something like that. Look, I think that in all seriousness, that you know, this is it's symptomatic of a greater problem, and that is seeing the value for life, seeing the value for family. Ultimately, the pagan, you know, we're not. You know, there's 1.5 million people that consider themselves pagans in America. That's expected to, you know, I think
Wait,
triple
how
by
many? How many?
1.5 million right now that
Wow.
consider themselves practicing pagans. Now, on the
Okay.
big scheme of things, when, you know, we have, you know, 300 and some million people in the country,
Yeah.
that's not a huge demographic. Now, it's growing. It's expected to double in recent years. But the bigger concern is what I would call soft paganism. And so soft paganism is there's people that don't know that they're pagan or that they've adopted pagan practices that think that they're Christian or think that they have more of a Western worldview mindset. So for instance, I was out doing man on the street videos because we do a lot of those at Turning Point here recently in Las Vegas. It was 115 degrees, you know, super hot out on the strip. And I'm out there in shorts and a t-shirt talking to
Yeah.
people as they come by. And we got a lot of people that talk to us. We got some people that yelled at and cussed at us when they figured out who we were with. And this was before, you know, Charlie's death, and you know, temperature was maybe down a little bit. But I would talk to people, and they would tell me they were a Christian. And then I would ask them a question on camera and say, "Well, what do you believe happens after we die?" And about, I would say, 40% of those who said they were Christian told me they believed in reincarnation. And so,
Wow.
here
Wait,
you have people that think-
40%?
40%.
About 40%.
Yeah, and again, now maybe because
That's
it's the
fascinating.
Vegas Strip, I'm not going to say that 40% of the church thinks that they're reincarnated, because 40% of the church might
Right.
not be out on the Vegas Strip right now.
No, of course.
But look, it still was telling
Yeah.
of something. You know, I'll wait for George Barna to come out with the actual stat and tell us all what it actually is. But the you know, when you look at this, what does that mean? It means a lot of people think that they're Christians, but their Christian worldview has been eroded by paganism, and they don't know that they're holding to certain pagan practices. We have Christians that are using sage; they'll burn sage in their house to cleanse evil spirits. That's witchcraft.
Right.
We have Christians that adopt what's called the Enneagram. A lot of people get mad at me
Yeah.
for this one, but the Enneagram, it's got its roots. The founder of the Enneagram is on camera. You can find it on YouTube or different places. He's on camera saying that he came up with the whole system through what's known as automatic writing, basically allowing a spirit guide to take over his body and to move his hand in order to develop the platform of the Enneagram. And we have Christian pastors that are using this to do, spiritual development with their church staff. It's paganism. And so, you really have to ask some tough questions today. And even something like Planned Parenthood is paganism. It's a sacrament of offering a child. So this is all soft paganism. It's sort of unseen paganism in that way. And that is, I think, the greater threat than even the blatant pagans that are out there.
So I do want to play this clip. President Trump speaking at the United Nations this week at the General Assembly actually addresses Christianity. Let's take a listen.
Our commitment, values, and those values really that we hold so dear together. Let us defend free speech and free expression. Let us protect religious liberty, including for the most persecuted religion on the planet today. It's called Christianity. And let us safeguard our sovereignty and cherish qualities that have made each of our nations so special, incredible, and extraordinary.
So, Pastor, listening to the president, and this is an issue that is very near and dear to my heart, CPAC's working on the ending of Christian persecution across the globe. We have allies, partners that we have, coalition partners on this issue. We've seen so many innocent Christians, Catholics being martyred at the hands of Islamic militants. And President Trump addressing this on the international stage, I think, is very telling. Tell us your reaction and why we continue to see the constant persecution of our church.
Yeah, this is a major problem. In fact, the last talk I saw Charlie give as a full-length talk was at our pastor summit in August. And I was with Charlie multiple times after that, but it was the last full speech that I was with him for. And his main talk to these pastors was warning them about the rise of Islam in the U.S. and that the church has to be extremely vigilant on how we navigate this.
Right.
Islam only works much like Marxism. And again, those two are finding kind of a weird, kindred spirit between each other, unfortunately. It only works when Christian values have been pushed out of society. Now, Christianity is very interesting because Christianity allows for a sense of, for some sort of pluralism. As a believer, and this is why what you saw the other night at the memorial is not Christian nationalism. Because what Christianity says is that we believe that this is the truth. We hope you come to know it. If you don't, that's your choice. We're not going to force this on you in the sense that you have to accept it or face some sort of punishment or
we're not forcing you to do this. Yeah.
Yes. Ultimately, God is the judge.
Yeah.
We're going to leave that to him for eternity. But we're saying we hope that you come to realize this because it's changed our life. We think it can change your life too. And we invite you into that process. If you don't believe that, we expect that if you're going to be part of our society, that you hold to a Western worldview and you follow the laws of our land, which happen to be based upon Christian principles. But we're not going to force you to be a Christian, but we are going to say murder's wrong, stealing is wrong, all these, and we can go down through the list and be able to address this. So our morality is based upon that. We're going to govern based upon that framework, but you have a choice in the matter. But that's not what Islam does. That's not what Marxism does. No. Islam and Marxism, they will say, this is the law of the land. This is Sharia law. This is what you have to accept or else. Marxism says this is what you have to accept or else. You look at something on social media we don't want you to look at, we're going to come cut a hole in your wall and drag you out and put you in prison.
That's right.
Because you're not allowed to do that unless we say that you are. And this is all, again, that self-deification.
And the jihadists basically saying, if you're an infidel, we can kill you. We
throw you off the roof. We
can
do whatever we want. Yeah, and we're justified in doing so. It's actually they're both Marxism and Islam are self-righteous in that they don't think they're doing this out of evil. They think they are purging society. It's got more in common with Nazism than it does with anything else. They think it's okay to purge society of somebody who's unrighteous for that reason.
And even worse, Pastor, that then with the Marxists and with the communists, they want the government, the state, to be God.
Yes,
they want
100%.
the state to be the parent. They're the ones that dictate the terms of what you can and cannot believe in. There is no freedom in those authoritarian dictatorships
100%.
in what is the communism ideology. And, you look at Russia, you look at the history of Russia, the massive killings, the millions and millions of innocent people that were killed, that died of famine, because they have no regard for life. They have no regard for the dignity of life, which is, I think, so central to Christianity. I do want to get a sense here, because obviously there's this constant back and forth and of the separation of church and state, which is what always the left makes that argument. It's a separation of church and state. You can't bring Christianity into this realm. I mean, we even saw, for example, these Democrats voting against this congressional resolution, basically, criticizing Charlie Kirk instead of saying, let's stand united against political violence. How do you respond to that? How do we respond to this idea of separation of church and state? But I feel so strongly that I want my Christianity, which is the center of who I am, to be part of my discourse in the public arena.
Yeah, so a great question. I think one that a lot of people struggle with if they don't take time to work through it. So first off, our founders came here. When you look at the history, they actually believed that they were setting up a millennial reign of Jesus Christ. They came here with the expectation that this was a kingdom that God was setting up so that it could be a place where godly principles and values could reign, for forever. And there was a sense of faith in virtually every single one of our founders. We had each one of even our states as they were formed mentioned God in their constitutions, I think except for one. There is God is mentioned 4 different times just alone in the Declaration of Independence. That's unheard of for any other nation, right?
Yeah.
And so you go to, I remember I posted a video here recently of I was at the Capitol building and we were doing worship. I was there with Chad Connolly from
yes,
and others.
Chad,
and,
well,
I'm sure a lot of
great
mutual
guy.
friends we have. And David Barton was there. We got a great tour of the Capitol, and we had a group of pastors with us, and we were all singing in the rotunda. And it's all, it's just a beautiful place. And I'm a terrible singer, so I kind of kept my voice down. But everybody else sounded
I'm a terrible singer
wonderful.
too. Okay, we share that.
I can't swim or sing. That's my confession here.
I can swim, but here's the deal. I have 5 daughters and my husband. They sing beautifully. Like, we go to church, and then when I start singing, they do one of these where they look at me like, kind of keep
please
it quiet.
don't. Yeah,
I don't know if you have the same
exactly what you're talking about.
experience.
I've gotten the look.
It's like the worst. I'm like, fine, I won't sing. I'll just be quiet.
So everybody's singing, and I've filmed this and put it online, and I have all these people going, this is Christian nationalism, all this sort of stuff. There's all the paintings in that room that have been hanging up in that room for a really long time. All have Christian references in them. Our God is referenced all over our nation's capital, in the White House, in the Supreme Court. In all of our buildings, he's there, he's present, because the concept of God and Christianity was infused in our nation from the beginning. Now, what was not infused was the state running the church, and what was not infused was also the church running the state. But it was expected that the state should have reverence for the gospel, reverence for the Lord, reverence for the teachings of Scripture, reverence for the law of God. There was a reverence for all of that. And so, this idea of church and state, we all know it wasn't part of the Constitution. It came from the Danbury Baptist letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote. And that was specifically to try to prevent the government from giving preference to one denomination over another. If the government comes out and says only Catholicism is recognized, or only, you have to be Calvinist to be, recognized in this nation, or you get preference as a result of that, that becomes a problem. That becomes that's where separation of church and state, I would start saying, hey, what about separation of church and state, guys? But what we're seeing here as the gospel is reaching highest officials in the land, and they're sharing the gospel at a memorial of our friend Charlie Kirk and testifying to the world.
It was amazing.
The saving power of Jesus Christ. That's not Christian nationalism. That's called politicians who happen to be Christians, and because they're wise. And I think that we need a lot more of that. I know people are going to hate it if they don't, if they reject the truth. But it doesn't matter what you do. They're going to hate everything you do because they reject the truth. And so I think that we have to keep moving, and we have to recognize that there's a strategic opportunity right now for truth to be declared. And I think that, Charlie Kirk, if he was here, he'd be taking advantage of it every second of it.
And I would say Christians who happen to be politicians. How about that?
Yeah,
I think that's even better.
Absolutely.
I really want to get here. I could literally spend hours talking to you because this is just so amazing. But let me get here your final thoughts as first of all, help what's your message to those of us out there as we enter into this next phase, right? Like, there's obviously the grieving part, the dealing with the shock of everything, and then moving into that next phase, which is, I believe, the phase of action, the phase of purpose, the phase of listening to God and what God uses you and your talents to do what He's asking you to do.
Yeah,
what is your advice to us?
I appreciate that. There's some interesting stuff that happens in tragedy like this, and I think that obviously this is an extreme, just it's an unthinkable situation. I miss Charlie so much, and honestly, as we're starting to get past the memorial, it's hit me even more. I've been in such go mode leading up to that.
Right.
Now I've felt it more today and yesterday than I have even at the beginning, I think, and I think it's the reality of it's really sinking in, and so. There is a unity that happens in these moments, or that can happen in these moments. It doesn't always happen, and we're seeing that right now. And that unity, though, it's fragile, and it's easy to be lost. It's easy to find disagreement. After the initial emotion, kind of wears off a little bit more. We have to really make it. It's very important right now that we don't forget what happened. That we don't forget who's responsible for what happened.
Right.
That we remember the solution to it that Charlie proclaimed, and that is the gospel. That we find unity across denominational lines, that we don't make this about, Catholic versus Protestant or charismatic versus Calvinist. We have to find, this is a major tenet for us at TPUSA Faith, we have to unify the church around primary doctrine. And I would say that also the conservatives have to be unified. I love seeing Elon and Trump shaking hands and sitting together, at the memorial. That was a beautiful thing, and I think Charlie wanted to see that sort of unity. Charlie was a gatherer, and he was a maintainer, and he was a builder. And there are people that were in Charlie's ecosystem and still within our ecosystem at TPUSA that disagree with one another on major issues.
Yeah.
But Charlie understood, as I heard somebody say here recently, that friction can create fire.
Yeah.
And he understood that ideas, when you allow them to rub together for long enough, the best ideas will rise to the top, and that it will create a spark, and that spark allows us to continue. And so we have to really avoid being tribal right now, I think, and we have to really focus on the gospel, have to unify the church, and have to realize that there's an ideological war on our young people, and that has to be everybody's focus on trying to win that battle and re-engage people with a biblical worldview.
And on your book, Pagan Threat, what's the message you want the readers to get from this book?
Yeah, at the end of the book, I have a 7-step plan, and I think this is something that every single political strategist should read. I think, if you don't think that faith is going to be a major part of the political conversation moving forward, then you weren't paying attention the last 12 days. It is the conversation. The divide between the godless and the God-fearing is the conversation moving forward. Anybody that doesn't really, recognize that, I think is going to become irrelevant, in the near future in this conversation. And so I hope that people heed it. But I have a 7-step plan in the book, Pagan Threat, that I give. And I think that it's really critical that we figure that out. We learn to walk through it. We're not going to get to where we want to go by accident. It's going to take strategy. There was no better strategist than Charlie Kirk. I'm so thankful I was able to learn under him for the last year and a half. We hope to keep that going and continue it. And with God's help and God's wisdom, we hope to do even more.
Yeah, I have great memories of Charlie. I just, he had such an impact on us and on our children. But we will continue to be inspired by his words and his actions. And like you say, unify the movement. It's a freedom movement. It's a faith movement. And we have a lot of work to do. And Pastor Lucas Miles, I am so glad God has put us together. It's such a blessing to have you on our show. And also, please, please, please order Pagan Threat. I'm actually also promoting this on Newsmax as well. So
awesome.
You're getting the double promo. And please get the right version of Pagan Threat, okay? It's a black cover, okay, with some white and red lettering with our friend.
You got to make sure you have the forward by Charlie Kirk,
because
the other ones don't have that. Yes.
There you go.
The other ones will even use my name. They're really good at scamming, so look closely.
That's crazy. All right. Well, Pastor Lucas Miles, God bless you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you all for watching. Remember to go to cpac.org for all the events that's happening, and stay close in touch also with what Turning Point is doing. Great ally. Thank you so much, and God bless.